So one of the other things that I found with GPT is it's really good at looking at something like a business model. And one of the things that people miss is they'll put in their business model and they'll say, GPT, critique this business model.
Yeah.
And what they end up doing is when you're that broad, your answer is going to be very poor. You have to give GPT shape and direction. You have to, otherwise it won't give you a good example. And let's say that you want to, let's do the New York Times. Let's do the New York Times. That would be really interesting because there'll actually be a tapestry of knowledge that it can build on.
Yeah.
So the New York Times, maybe you want to write this. So the New York Times, they came out with a memo, I want to say it was 2015 or 2016, and it's actually extremely interesting, where they spoke about how they need to change as a company in order to stay in business. And the New York Times, they make money by being the authoritative source on news stories around the world, politics and culture. And what they have needed to do is shift from advertising revenue to subscription revenue. So what I would like to know, and maybe we can ask GPT, is what is their annual revenue? How many readers do they have per year? What are the most profitable parts of the business? What are the least profitable parts of the business? And then we can just ask GPT to critique the business model.
Yeah.
So have that be the final sentence.
We asked it, tell me more about how the New York Times makes money. Well, what we want to know is what their annual revenue is, how many readers they have, and what are the most profitable parts of the business and least profitable parts. So New York Times reached an annual revenue of approximately $2.31 billion, which was an 11% increase from the previous year's. Previous year's $2.07 billion. The revenue from subscriptions was significant, amounting to $1.5 billion in 2022. And they had 9 million subscribers in 2022. Advertising revenue was $523 million. Yeah, I don't know if it did. Do you feel like it answered all the questions that you have?
That's a really good answer. So why don't we do this? Tell me about the biggest risks in the business over the next 10 years. So I just want to set this up.
Yeah.
This is the bad answer.
Yeah.
And I don't think that it's going to be that helpful.
Yeah.
What I want to do is I want to look at this and then I want to compare it to the next answer and I want to set something up about how to use GPT really effectively as a sparring partner if you're some sort of investing analyst, where we're going to get some really specific answers out of this.
I love it. So one of the things that you should know is it just used Bing to search for the answer to your question. So rather than answering from its own sort of knowledge, it just Googled, like, what are the biggest risks for media companies over the next 10 years, which is something that you might want it to do, but it will affect the answer because it's basically just summarizing things that other people have written directly from its first search rather than like just creating it from what it knows. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. We may want to redo it and have it not look on the web. But
no, I love this. I mean, this is just buzzword bingo.
Yeah.
And this is ridiculous. Cybersecurity threats, disruptive innovation, and digital transformation. Like, I feel like I'm at, the business school 301 seminar, just like eye rolling on a Tuesday morning. It's like, oh my goodness, pandemic related challenges, supply chain and vendor risk. Like, these are just ridiculously broad swath climate risk. Like, what?
Right.
No, like these aren't the actual risks, right? So let's get super specific and let's say, don't search the web, look up the work of Clayton Christensen, Michael Porter, and Ben Thompson, and focus on how the New York Times can continue to shift from advertising revenue to subscription revenue.
And tell me like how you got that, like why you want to do that versus the previous prompt, which was much more general.
Great question.
Yeah.
So GPT is magical when it comes to names.
Yeah.
Names are like the ultimate compression.
Yeah.
And that's what you want to do. Whenever you're communicating something, you want to think about compression, right? How much can I deliver in just a few words?
Yeah.
And if I say Clayton Christensen, what it's going to do is it's going to look up his jobs to be done framework.
Yeah.
It's going to look up his disruption theory.
Yeah.
And just in 2 words, I can subsume all those ideas into that prompt. And I can do the same thing with Porter's five forces. I can do the same thing with Ben Thompson's aggregation theory.
Yeah.
And it'll probably give me something about aggregation theory, about Porter's 5 forces. And now what we've done is we have that tapestry of knowledge. And now we can start having a conversation amongst those 3 people to see where the Mount Rushmore of business strategists agree. And then what do they disagree on? And then the fault lines of disagreement. Now we can follow those and we can see what the different vectors of strategy can be.
I love that. So we got our answer. So you want to read it out for us?
Sure. So, I mean, this is exactly it. So now we have, look at how much better this is. So we have disruptive innovation, smaller, nimbler competitors who offer cheaper, more accessible, or innovative solutions that gradually move up market. So that's what you're seeing with somebody like Chris Williamson's podcast is doing this. He is a one-man show, basically, and he's moving up market with better and better production quality. Okay, interesting. Not a direct competitor, but these small media companies,
like
that's
Every.
what we're seeing there. Like Every, there we go. I mean, that's what this is, right? This is you moving up market. Hey, we're on video and stuff like that. Great example. Now, Porter's 5 forces. I don't actually know what these are, so let's look at them. So, threat of new entrants can enter the market with lower barriers, especially in the digital space. Now that's a great answer. Okay, so the ability to produce and distribute content has been democratized. Absolutely. Bargaining power of customers. What's this? Have more options for news and content. Their willingness to pay might decrease unless the New York Times offers distinct value. I love those words, distinct value. What does that mean? Let's index that, bookmark it. We'll come back to it. Threat of substitutes. Alternative sources of news and information. I don't know if you saw what Steven Sinofsky wrote about Twitter a few months ago, but this is what's happening. We're seeing this rise of citizen journalism, and media companies can no longer compete on certain vectors. So what happened in the late 20th century is a company like the New York Times, they could have privileged special access to certain high-level people. Now with Google and even just all the people who have boots on the ground, the people who are there can often distribute information faster. The famous example of this was when the Sully U.S. Airways airplane crashed. The people on the plane, the people who were by the Hudson River, they were reporting better than a lot of the media companies because they were just there sharing information. Bargaining supply of suppliers. I mean, I've written about this, that the cost of retaining top talent is getting harder and harder. You have people who are leaving these traditional media companies and they're going to launch their own thing, right? And the media companies have to do a better and better job of convincing the journalists who they work with to stay. Industry rivalry. Okay, I don't think that one is quite as interesting. Aggregation theory. A risk lies in the potential dominance of digital platforms like Google and Facebook that aggregate news content. I mean, there's no doubt, right? So look at how much came from this. We have very specific things. And now it's given us some strategies. Now, what I would be interested in, maybe for the next question, is name the number one strategy for the New York Times to use, period. Tell me a recommendation from Clayton Christensen, Ben Thompson, and Michael Porter. Give me an answer for each one that's no longer than one paragraph. So now we're going to get a one-sentence strategy. We're going to get a paragraph to summarize, and we're going to get 3 different perspectives.